Uh, hey Tim, how you doing?
Good, Robbie. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm good.
Nice to see you.
Yeah, nice to see you as well.
Thank you.
You know, with you guys playing routinely, most years deep into June, I'm curious for you with the season now, getting ready to get started. Is it kind of like, oh wow, the off season flew by, or are you just raring to go all November and December? We're getting, excited for this moment.
Well, everyone's excited. I think the fall's a little bit different just because it feels a little bit slower than retrospect. It goes by so fast. But I think right now there's not much ramp up time, so it's on us quick. So yeah, I think the excitement of just getting into a schedule and playing again is building.
We'll kick it over to Arya.
Hi, Tim. Injury wise, some of the guys who are injured in the fall, Doolin, Hliboki, Carter Young, are they going to be ready to go? What's kind of the timeline with those injuries?
Doolin is not. He had a second surgery on his elbow, so he's out. Hliboki right now is throwing. I just think we have to walk through that with a little bit of a lot of care, just because we don't want to push him back into action in May and June when the temperatures of the games literally are high. So we just have to wait and see on that one. And then Carter Young is back. Yes, he's fully back.
Kayla Anderson.
Hey, Coach. Good to see you. Hope you had a great off season. I'm just kind of curious with some of these new guys, all these freshmen coming in. I know it's still fairly early on, but what's the personality? What's kind of the personality of this group in full? Because I know every single year it's a little bit different.
Well, I think the recruiting classes are, and we recruited pretty well through the years. I think maybe the difference with this group and the difference maybe in the last couple of groups is, Mike Baxter and Brown now have been here. Mike's been here for a long period of time. So you start to see some of his touch in terms of how he feels about Vanderbilt and the type of player that belongs here. And I think you can see that inside the group. I think there's pretty good maturity. I think you can see that academically for sure in the first term, which the first term for these kids is very difficult. But I would say their personalities they're good. I think they've got good timing in terms of how they approach me, how they approach the situation, how they approach the staff, Maggie. I think they're comfortable and getting more comfortable. You see a big difference when they get back here after Christmas. There's a whole lot more comfort and you can just see a little bit of not so much awkwardness, I would say.
Jill.
Hey, Coach Corbin, Jill Johnlick with Fox 17. Nice to meet you, Coach.
Thank you, Jill.
Similar to Kayla's question, kind of piggybacking off of that, you talked about the different kind of personalities of your players. Now that you've been through this offseason with this group of guys, is there an identity that is starting to form, or that has already formed, that has made them more unique? And what is it about this group that makes you so excited about this year's team?
Well, I'm always hesitant as we start out, just because you never know what you have. I mean, it is a new team. I mean, when you look at who they are, you got all the new freshmen, and really for Enrique Bradfield, it's the first year that he's been a sophomore. Dominic Keegan's first year, he's been a senior. So there's a transformation that takes place. They're 12 months older, removed from last year, but I would say their identity will probably be wrapped up in how they perform along the way. I think it takes experiences in games to do that. The kids who are coming back have some experiences in the past, which will help them, but it's just a frame of reference, not residence. You just can't live there, and you can't think that anything that you've accomplished in the past, whether it's good or bad, is going to have an effect. You just have to take those experiences, learn from them, and use them going forward. And I think the kids have done that. I feel like there's a maturity level, and I've said that several times through the years, but I think there's a maturity level here that's pretty good, pretty solid, pretty even all the way around.
Thank you, Coach.
Thank you.
Chris Lee.
Yeah, Tim, to that, your better teams have had identifiable leaders, and you've had several guys that have been around now and been to Omaha and all the things that come with where, knowing what it's like to get to where you need to be. Are you seeing guys step forward as leaders that you can identify? And how does that compare to maybe some of your better teams in past? Are you seeing guys step up to where you have leadership at the level where you've had with your best teams?
I can see glimpses of it. But I think how I answered Jill is, I think part of that and part of leadership is the process of going through a year and going through a schedule and going through the ebbs and flows of the schedule. And the other thing is your roster, you go from really everyone playing from a roster where very few are playing. If you look at a roster of 40, then you've got a lot of people that are watching other people eat, and you've got 9 or 10 or 11 people eating every day, and everyone else is watching. And that's not easy to do. And I think leadership has a great way when those things occur throughout. We talk about them a lot because they're for sure, they're going to happen, is how they create that harmony inside the locker room and away from here. But I think that has to happen throughout the season. We spend a lot of time talking, as I said, approaching those things, because it's inevitable that there's going to be disappointment with kids for not playing, and it's really how they figure out a team role rather than a playing role. And I think leadership has a lot to do with that. So it's almost like we'll see. It's going to be very fluid.
Tom Wood.
Hi, Coach. Good to see you again.
Thank you, Tom.
So I'm writing a story about the NIL, and I wanted to get your thoughts on how it's affected your program, your thoughts on how it's changing the game and college athletics in general, how many players you've got, and, just kind of in general. Some have called it the Wild West right now. Commissioner Sankey's and others have suggested federal guidelines are needed. What are your thoughts about it?
Well, I think the Wild West was kind of an anticipatory statement on what might happen with it. You saw the football piece really early. There were several quarterbacks throughout the nation that got some notoriety where the NIL packages. For us, it's been minimal. We have some players that have had some opportunities. I don't think they're not grand in nature. Will that change? I think the Alston rule has a chance to affect our players more so than NIL. I think NIL, once you go through the cycle for a year or two, then you'll start to figure out what you need to do that way. But I think you just don't want to get it to a point where NIL becomes ridden by your boosters to where they're supplying the players just a way of getting around cheating and just funding their opportunities here. I just don't want to get to that point. I think it was meant to be something completely different. But if you give someone an inch, they take a mile. And I think in certain cases that often happens, certainly in recruiting. Your experiences as a group are probably better than mine, but my eyes kind of roll a little bit when I start to see the recruiting rankings come out in football, and you see some differences, and you wonder where those differences are coming from. Could it be recruiting? It could be. But your mind, I guess, always moves to some sort of skepticism in terms of how are they getting those players. So I don't know. We deal with it minimally, which is good, because I just don't think these kids should have a lot on their plate at 18 and 19, 20 years old. Navigating an academic schedule, certainly here, and navigating growing on the field is probably all they need to do. They don't need to be, if they build a bank account in a small way, great. But I don't think their mind and efforts need to be moving towards work and finances right now. These should be the best times of their life, and part of that is because they don't have a lot on their plate to eat.
It would have been interesting to see the kind of deals Kumar and Jack would have gotten a year ago if it had been effective then.
Yeah, I would have. Yeah, would have been interesting. The deal I would have gotten 1984 too, Tom. But those days have passed us, right? So
Absolutely.
they'll get good deals. They don't have to worry about deals.
Thanks, Coach.
Yeah.
We'll kick it back to Robbie.
Tim, with the last two MLB drafts being shortened, and then also a number of teams being able to bring back super seniors, I've seen some talk that the quality of play in college baseball could be really good this year, and that it could be a really exciting season. Do you think that's the case? Do you think that will affect the game at all positively, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I do think it's the case. I think there's two things, Robbie, that will drive this league even to a higher level. I think number one, seniors, as you mentioned, I think that's first. There's a lot of kids that have stayed back, like a Dominic Keegan, that have coming back for their fourth year, and because of the COVID situation and that 20-year really not getting you got a quarter of a year. I think the other thing is free agency. We have a free agency situation in college baseball right now with a portal, just as football does and just as basketball does. And there were a large amount of kids that flowed into our conference that were really good players, either at mid majors or other Division Ones, and people have really added to their roster. We have not done that, and I don't really want to do that unless it's a good fit for us. But other schools have made good use of the portal, and you're starting to see rosters. There's some very good teams inside this conference, and teams that we're playing, such as Oklahoma State and others.
David White.
Hey, Coach. I'm getting on a little bit late, but have you addressed the Kumar situation and what are his expectations for this season? Where do you expect him to be?
I haven't addressed it. I expect him to be in Knoxville, working out. He is going back and forth from Knoxville to California. So he's in the midst right now of preparing himself for the next draft. He potentially, just based on my conversations with him, could be playing a little bit of baseball this year, but it would be in an independent league. But I'm still not sure about that. And those are the things that he's doing with his advisement. But he's doing well. He looks great. He looks as good as he's ever looked, in my opinion, over the last 4 years. He's working out very well, and he's very much on course to be very healthy and be pitching at some point. He's already throwing off a mound, but to be pitching this year, unfortunate situation, but he's made the best of it.
Arya.
Tim, it was recently announced that you got a new extension. How do you feel about that extension, particularly with so many, SEC coaches getting extended this year and a lot of, bigger name coaches coming into the SEC?
Well, it's certainly a compliment, from Vanderbilt to us, and it creates consistency within the program, which I like for the kids. I think the only thing about it, and I truly feel this way, and Maggie feels this way too, being compensated for being a teacher and a coach is a really extraordinary gift. I never thought that possible. And I think the great thing about having money is the ability to share it and move it towards other people and other things that will help the growth of them personally and help the growth of the program. So we're just very lucky and thankful that, Vanderbilt, I feel very young, but I know what my numbers say on my birth certificate. And I think for Vanderbilt to look at that and say, this guy still has the energy and the wherewithal to be around for a while is certainly a compliment. I think the thing that I would always do, though, is I will always know that time. I have pretty good awareness about myself. And if I ever felt like I couldn't satisfy the needs of the program and the university, I would step away. But I feel like I'm one of those guys that I feel like I'm just beginning in a lot of different ways. I love what I'm doing, and I feel like I've reinvented myself at different points, but my energy levels have always remained the same.
Kayla Anderson.
Coach, just speaking of, you kind of mentioned the COVID years, the past couple of years, and it looks like every season it's getting a little bit more normal. How excited are you just for the kids to have a little more normalcy this season as we try to kind of climb away from this COVID outbreak?
Very much, Kayla. I mean, yeah, you're right. I mean, even last year, going back at this time right here, we were so unsure of so many different things. And then it just felt eerie that, one of your pitchers could throw a no-hitter and only like 100 people would see it. It was just kind of a weird set of circumstances. And not until we played Kentucky at the end of the year did we start to see what it could be. And Omaha was weird too. I mean, it was certainly great, but there was something missing. There were a lot of scheduling things that were missing, but the event was a little bit different. So yes, I'm thankful, and hopefully we're moving in the right direction. I love every time I hear something about the NFL, it's kind of moving into, okay, we're just going to have to live with this. Who am I? But I think that's what it is. I just think we're going to have to live with this thing, and we're just going to have to be prudent about what we do and protect one another. But you've got to live, and you've got to give these kids the opportunity to do the things that allow them to build mental growth. And thankfully we're doing it.
Jill.
Yes, Coach. Going back to kind of your thoughts on that contract extension, it sounds like you had a lot of time to reflect and over the last couple months, and you spoke a little bit about how your energy levels have stayed the same, but you have pivoted in a couple different directions and grown. Where have you seen the most growth in your career and your ability as a coach?
Well, I'd say probably the last 5 or 6 years, really. I think just my day-to-day way of operating to prepare the kids for a day. I think spending greater time in a classroom, spending more time preparing for a classroom, understanding that there's a lot of value right now in it, not because of my information, but it becomes such a great space for us to just center ourselves and stay away from everything else that's happening around you before you go to the field. And I think for young people in general, that's really important. I think it provides a safe haven. And I feel pressure is not the right word, but I do feel the pressure to produce something that's worthy when you go inside that room. Otherwise, they're going to be looking at me and saying, you know what, you didn't bring it. And I would hate to be accused of not bringing anything. So I think that part in, reinventing yourself and looking at yourself each year and what can you do differently and what can you do better for the kids. I think it's just looking at the kids every single year and say, what can you do better for them? Because it's really, just basically facilitating an environment for them to grow and to get better in every way. And we're using baseball in a way to do that. And baseball is important. The winning piece has been important in this program. But I think at the same time, we've been able to do other things inside of it that have benefited the kids.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chris Lee.
Yeah, Tim, a couple of questions on the pitching staff, starting with a clarification from where you started. You said Doolin is out. That's out for the year?
He is.
Okay. And you said Sam is throwing. Do you have a timeline on when that might mean he could pitch for you in games?
Yeah, his timeline is, he's tossing. He's not off the mound. So I think he's probably, he is. He's moving his arm at about 90 feet. I think if he was going to pitch, Chris, it falls in a tough, it falls at the end of May, it falls in June. And I think those are the questions that Sammy, his dad, myself, the health people, we've been talking through, because we've got to talk about what the worth of that for him and for for him first, and then for our program. So I think that's still up in the air, but he's working hard. And you asked me about leadership, and he's one of those kids that he's very intentional what he's doing with the team right now. And I love what he's doing because he's taken on a team role for a kid that knows that it's unlikely that he'll have a playing role.
I wanted to ask you about the back end of your bullpen. Sometimes you have experimented with closers as starters, and Nick's a guy who can go several innings. Are you seeing him fitting in the back end of your bullpen, and who might be the other 3 or 4 guys who are in the mix to maybe pitch the 7th, 8th, and 9th in conference?
And I think
Begins
that
if you're there.
Yeah, we're not quite there yet because we're training a lot of guys from a volume standpoint, Chris, to be starters. And I think you get to a point where you identify 4 or 5, potentially 6 guys that could start a game for you. Early part of the season, you're opening up with 5 games a week, and then it diminishes to 4. So getting 4 or 5 guys that can start for you is the most important thing. And then you've got your fallback crew of guys that you're going to lessen their volume, but give them more touches throughout the week. And we're not there yet. We're I would say by week 2 we start training Friday. I would say with week 2, Chris, we're probably moving that direction. And I probably could give you a better handle, and at least myself too, of who might be doing that.
David White.
Hey, Coach, to that point about starters, you may have addressed this too. I got on a little late, but and I know it's to be determined after practice, but who are some of the guys you're looking at to be starters, and what do you like about those specific guys?
Well, I think the names, if you took Little and you took Riley and you took Schultz, I mean, those are guys who have started in our program before. So they have some experience with that. Maldonado is someone that we've talked to even before the season about training like a starter and giving him more innings. He was very valuable to us coming out of the bullpen in the middle and certainly at the end last year, and we used him heavily. So I think we're looking at him more as the potential of a starter. And then you have freshmen that could fit in that role too, like a Carter Holton. But, I just don't want to leave anyone out because you got Chris McIlvain and Hunter Owen who could fit in that role too. And then you have other kids that in the next couple of weeks may give you a look and potentially a vision of using them in that role. But I would say those kids in general.
Aria, did you have another question?
Yeah, just related to the pitching. What's it kind of like going from a year when you had a pretty experienced pitching staff to particularly in the starting rotation to having, younger pitchers without as much experience?
Mm-hmm. Well, you're going to go through those cycles through your years. I mean, I think 19 was similar. We had Fellows back, and then Hickman started some games, but we didn't have a number 3 starter, and we didn't know what that would look like. And Kumar wasn't Kumar until midway, or at least past midway of the spring season. So we didn't know what he was going to give us either. So I just think from a pitching staff, that's where an identity is built along the way. You just start to understand who are the guys that can do what, who are the guys who can start, and who are the guys that are coming on for you that fit well coming out of the bullpen. But we've been there before. 18, little bit, 19, yes. Certainly the youngest staff we ever had was 12. I think Chris Lee remembers that, and that was rough goings at the beginning, but then we kind of settled down and got to become a pretty good team at the end. But we're not that young. We have some experience. We just don't have we just don't have guys with 80 or 90 or 100 innings under their belt that are coming back. We've got guys coming back that have 40 and 50 innings under their belt, and more of them than we have in the past. But that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be starters.
Don't see any raised hands. Does anybody else have a question for Coach Corbin? All right, you all. Well, oh, David White.
Yeah, Coach. In 2019, when y'all won it all, I don't know if you ever talked about Omaha before the season or during the season, or do you ever address that at all? Do you think about that, or do you talk to your team about that ever?
No, we create more of a vision than talking about it, but I don't refer to it at all. We all know it's almost like the elephant in the room, right? You know, that everyone wants to get to a certain point at the end of the year, but our concentration isn't on that. It's not on winning an SEC title. I mean, I think those are outcomes that happen if you stay very consistent with what you're doing inside your program. So I think more than anything, we stay very regimented on what we're doing right now. You don't look ahead at all, because I think that's dangerous. And really for these kids, it's poisonous. I think I talked about centering earlier, but the best thing that they can do is really center themselves on what's happening right now. And if they're growing in the right direction, then they'll play. If we're growing in the right direction, then we've got a chance to be successful. If we don't, then, you know, we're going to be where we're supposed to be. But I keep it very simple.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions? Well, thank you all for joining today. Thanks, Coach, for your time.
Thank
Yeah,
you, Coach.
likewise.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Coach.
Coach.
Thank you.
Great to see everyone again. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Thanks, Corbs.
Yep. Yes, sir.